Trilemmas and what it means for gold, Bitcoin, and perhaps the meme stocks. Josh, I'm sure you've heard of the old phrase time, money, energy. Pick any two. You can have as much as you want, but you can only have two of those, meaning you must leave one on the table. In macro, there's a general concept of the macroeconomic trilemma. Josh, can you put it up on the screen? So right here, this is how it's traditionally understood, the policy trilemma. So the point is that country or a central bank or whatever, right? They can choose, they want to control all three of these things. But of these three things, they can only control two, meaning one they will not have control over. So exchange rate management, that's just a fancy way of saying for example, China might want to control their exchange rate of the renminbi to the dollar or whatever, right? So that'd be, they have now made one of their two choices. The monetary autonomy would be the equivalent of setting interest rates in the country. And the third one up there would be free capital mobility. Now, in the case of China, as it's generally understood, is that China has opted to choose to manage the exchange rate and manage monetary autonomy. That is, they can control the exchange rates internally. But what that also means is that they cannot necessarily have free capital mobility, or another way you would hear it say is they can't have an open capital account for that regard. If you want me to do the United States has the United States has monetary autonomy and free capital mobility, but the United States cannot control the rate of the dollar to a foreign currency. Anyways, this is just a fancy way of saying that people want to control all three of these things, but they only can choose two to control. And I was thinking about this the other day, and specifically I was thinking about it in regards to COMEX. If you've ever spent time in the precious metal space, you know that there's a rallying cry that the price of the commodities, mainly the precious metals, gold, silver, etc., are suppressed. And the mechanism that suppresses this is COMEX, or other schemes like COMEX, but COMEX for those based in the States, in the sense that they can issue they can basically issue paper gold, that is, a contract for future delivery that trades one-on-one with existing gold. And so then I thought to myself, Justin, this sounds a lot like the trilemma. And here's what I mean by this. So you've got these three sides or whatever, right? And let's say that you're COMEX running the show or whatever, right? If you can issue an unlimited amount of supply, and as long as that supply within reason is deemed to be equivalent with the underlying. So in other words, people would view a 1,000 ounces or a 5,000 ounce silver future delivery contract as par with having 5,000 ounces. Essentially, people trust COMEX that they have the goods for it. COMEX can actually manage the exchange rate. And when I say manage the exchange rate, what I mean in that front is that depending upon how much paper or how little paper COMEX issues, or people on COMEX issues, when I say COMEX issues, I mean the traders on COMEX. I don't mean COMEX is running some sort of nefarious scheme behind the curtain or anything. But my point, though, is that using COMEX as a mechanism, those who trade extensively on COMEX are able to manage the exchange rate. In this case, it would be the price of silver or the price of gold per dollar that's received. Because if you're looking to buy bullion from the customer standpoint, where does JM Bullion, where does APMEX, where does ST Bullion and the likes, where do they get their feed from? Well, they get it from COMEX and other market makers. So anyways, it's very interesting when you have the derivative setting the actual exchange rate. Anyways, moving on to the free capital mobility. This is the concept, I think, if you relate it back to COMEX, is can you or can you not actually take delivery of the underlying? In other words, you might say, okay, listen, I've got one contract for future delivery on silver. I think it's 5,000 ounces per contract. You want to know what? I don't want to be cash settled. I actually just want to take, my 5,000 ounces, COMEX, it's deliver it to, my agent at, the following address, whatever, right? But that's the free capital mobility. The fact that the representation of the underlying, the contract for future delivery, can be freely exchanged with the actual underlying asset itself, and there's enough there to take advantage of it. And then it gets back into this monetary autonomy part. And this is where it gets really interesting, because again, if you spent time in the precious metal space, Andy Sheckman of Miles Franklin oftentimes make the comment that, price is being used as a tool of misdirection. And like on the bigger picture, if people would say, well, listen, we're going to use gold, or the price of gold, or we're going to use the change in the price of gold as a litmus test to decide whether or not, we're facing inflation, whether or not we're facing deflation. Or said another way, the price of gold might be one of the few things that the public still understands can put a check on the central banks, and the central banks probably don't like having a check. I mean, who would on it? But my point, though, is that the monetary autonomy, monetary autonomy in this case equates to the public perception of what's going on with the economy at whole vis-a-vis the gold price. In other words, if the price of gold is, staying level or going down, the public might say, okay, well, look, I understand we might be facing some inflation coming up, but gold's not really, responding as anticipated, and people aren't really buying gold. It's maybe not that big thing, but that's the conceptual. How is the public going to respond to that? And what I find interesting about this is that I think what COMEX has done in this regard is that the two sides they've selected is the exchange rate management. So that's, setting up what is the price of gold or silver, whatever, per ounce, and the free capital mobility. And their weak spot is the free capital mobility because there is not enough. I just saw a thread on it the other day, but when you look at the amount of when you look at the amount of silver, for example, COMEX has in the vaults, and you look at the outstanding contracts, there's nowhere near enough to actually cover the redemptions.
Like 40 to 1. I mean,
it's
like the paper market is trading like multiples upon multiples over the entire silver markets. And what is the problem here? If there was a situation where people said, you know what, I don't want to trade silver. I want my silver.
Yep.
Even if it was just a small percentage, if COMEX is not backed one-to-one, which is the theme that we see with a lot of different scenarios where people are promising that they are one-to-one backed. We see this in cryptos everywhere. But if they are not, then, and even if they're not, even if they are, it doesn't matter because there's a situation where more people have claims on silver than even exist in the world, and there's no possible way to get it. This isn't like an Alameda that you can print dollars to fund their FTX token. That you cannot print silver, even if you mined. It's just not possible.
You were trading a contract for future delivery on COMEX. You are, I would assume there's like a 95, if not higher % chance you are a sophisticated investor. In other words, you know that there is not enough metal in the COMEX vaults to basically cover everything that's outstanding. But at the same time, you have belief that, well, I certainly believe that everyone's going to call it in. And it's this weird like confidence factor saying, okay, well, listen, I know there's not enough out there, but I think that I'm going to be clever enough, or I don't necessarily mind cash settling, or whatever, right, at the end of the day for that. But the thing is that as long as there's this confidence from the market participants with the market maker, that is the traders who trade with COMEX, do these traders who trade with COMEX have ultimate belief in COMEX to eventually be able to get the metal, then that gives the ability for COMEX to actually, run this. And just to be fair to COMEX, I would say, they to the best of my knowledge, COMEX has never claimed to be a delivery mechanism. Okay. Now they do have some that they can deliver to guaranteed contracts on, but whatever, right? I don't think they actually ever set themselves out to build themselves as it. But as long as a contract for future is viewed synonymously with the actual underlying. So in other words, I understand COMEX might not have enough for everyone, but they're going to have enough for me. Might be the logic people think about, these sophisticated traders think about. Then you have this stand-in asset, this paper asset, which I would argue is really a contra liability. So it's a representation of the asset, not the thing itself, but the confidence that the market participants have that these things will be interchangeable due to the free capital mobility from this, that kind of gives credence to the entire system. That's the injection of confidence, you could say, right there. And the thing is, as long as that exists, then this can cascade over to the monetary policy side. That is, the public at large is going to be saying, well, listen, like gold's not spiking up. I mean, Josh, here's a question for you. Let's say suddenly like gold, I mean, I don't know, and let's say in a period of, let's say 3 days, what's gold trading at right now? 17.5, or let's say 17.50 roughly is what gold's at right now. Let's say all of a sudden it shoots up to, in a period of, let's say 2 or 3 days, to 2,600 or whatever, right? This is going to turn heads, and not just heads from, the big guys in the scene, but it's also going to turn heads from, the little guys. This would probably make news. And I don't want to say the average idiot, but people are probably clever enough to understand that if gold starts shooting up, there's some real problems. So in other words, people, that is the general public, probably more than other factors, will look at gold as a canary in the coal mine. But this gets back to the COMEX angle, because if you can use COMEX to manage the price through paper contracts that are believed to be synonymous with the underlying, then you're able to, I don't want to say short circuit, but you're able to exercise control over a mechanism that the general public might look to see if inflation is going to be a problem, or a mechanism that the public would look to say, well, listen, if this thing suddenly starts, going off, then, there might be some stormy times on the economic horizon. Your thoughts?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
and then that's a negative or positive feedback loop for gold.
Yeah.
When the price of any asset usually spikes up uncontrollably, that piles more FOMO, and people will give a reason as to why it's spiking up and justify their rationale to buy some or buy more, because no, that's where FOMO kicks in. And if COMEX, like you're saying, is potentially kind of deep in the here, that could provide a lot of issues for the gold market.
Yeah, and I would say one other thing too. Like, so there's three comments in closing of a note. Consider what happened with the nickel issue on London earlier this year. Where they basically had to shut down. See, that's basically where they had to shut down the free capital mobility. If you look back at the chart for that, in order to bring things back
Basically,
into
what
normal.
happened is the price shot up so much, let's say $100,000.
No,
They
no, it was
said,
a counterparty. It was a counterparty that failed. It was that Chinese guy. That's what started the entire
yeah,
problem. You're right.
but what did the silver market, or what did the copper,
Nickel.
what did the nickel market actually do? They said, oh, the price may be at 100,000, but we're going to settle everyone at 50 right now. And then
Yeah.
they basically just closed everyone's position, which is, I mean, highly illegal, but it just got completely ran underneath the rug.
Yeah, but see, I would say, like, again, like, I don't know if I would even use the word illegal, because I think COMEX probably, I mean, again, I've never subjected myself to the, should we say, fun of reading through, the T's and C's of this stuff, but I would assume that there's a clause where they can cash settle in the case of a force majeure, an act of God type thing, which is probably what they'd claim. Now, that being said, if you actually, and this is the problem, like, if you actually want to take delivery of the underlying, for whatever reason, financial security, whatever, right, you're not going to get it. You're going to get cash settled, and the cash settlement you get is going to be nowhere near enough to buy the amount of metal that you thought you could have gotten if you could have taken delivery of the damn thing in the first place. But whatever. So that's the first comment on that front. So think back to what happened with nickel. If you want to see a real life example, when the confidence breaks down and they have to close the capital accounts, that is, they have to stop redemption for the underlying, or they have to force cash settle people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you can also probably have it go the opposite direction too. That is to say, this arguably is a mechanism to deflate or to suppress the price of a commodity. But the same mechanisms, that same macroeconomic trilemma could probably, I suspect, could be applied to other things. So think about the USDT Bitcoin pump, where it's the same thing, but it's the exact opposite way that's going through. So that's something else I kind of wonder. But I haven't done the mental logic to think through that, but I suspect there's probably something there. My point is that if you can use something like this to suppress the price of something, you can also use this to juice the price of something. I think it goes both ways. It just depends upon how you want to dial the knobs or whatever.
Yeah, so the
that.
golden trilemma. This equates
Yeah.
not just gold, but I would argue Bitcoin, any currency out there, and a lot of other things. You cannot have everything in one. I mean, let's just look at the Bitcoiners today. I mean, they want your cake, they want to eat it, and then once they eat your cake, they get mad at you that it's gone. And it's just ridiculous how people think that one thing can just solve all worldly issues, and it's not possible. There are trade-offs to everything in life, and
Yeah.
that will continue to happen. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next time.